Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
We're from the Design Interactions Programme at the Royal College of Art. My name's Neil Usher.
I'm Shing Chung.
And so we're going to talk to you about our project work, which is based on the theme of interpretation of information. And there's a way that people interpret information, and there's a way we like our technology to interpret information. But there's also this kind of grey area in between. And so that's where we were really interested. And we've explored this from two angles. And Shing's just going to talk about his one now.
So my project's the Superstitious Fund project, but just before I talk about that, I'm just going to talk about the research side. And it's about how our superstitions, our rationalities, when they start to emerge from our private sphere to really shape the world we live in. Some of them are a lot more obvious, like lift numbers, avoiding the number 13. Something like 60% of lifts in America avoid that number. And in the UK, if you have a house number 13, it automatically devalues your house by £7,500. And it's increasingly harder to sell your house back into the market. Here in America, you have laws that state that you have to report a ghost sighting if you put your house up for sale. As a result, this devalues your house by 30%. And finally, Friday the 13th, people stop doing business, they stop traveling, and as a result, the US economy can lose up to $2.4 billion a year. So these things really do affect the world we live in. They often go hidden, or we choose to ignore them, because we consider ourselves as very rational and scientific beings. So I created 3 projects as a response to this research. I'm going to talk about one project, a superstitious fund. And what I created was an investment fund that runs on a superstitious trading algorithm. So it's live right now, and it's going to be a 1-year experiment. It started on June the 1st of last month. So what this algorithm believes in is numerology and moon phases. So for instance, it has the fear of the number 13. Whenever it sees this, it starts to sell or predict that the market's going down. And solar eclipses as well, full moons. There's a whole list of these superstitious beliefs that enables the algorithm to buy or to sell. On top of that, the algorithm also generates its own lucky and unlucky charms. In the same way that we always connect patterns up. For instance, if we win a tennis match, we believe in lucky socks. And this is what the algorithm does. It looks for these patterns, and it creates its own lucky numbers, its own lucky moon phases. And it uses these as a new logic in trading. And it does this for 1 year, so it has this learning capability. I created the algorithm with a company called Trading Gurus that provided the program. I supplied the design, the concepts, and the rules, and he programmed it. Before the experiment, £5,000 was invested from 144 investors. This is just a map of where the investors are located. So the money will be distributed back to the investors after the 1 year, which will be next year. This is the live performance board that I created that tracks the performance, the value, every 8 seconds. This is just a short clip just to show the animation. So it just shows what it believes in on the bottom, and it refreshes every single 8 seconds to show the live value. Right now it's down minus 8%. And this is the previous performance of the algorithm. So as you can see, it's quite active. It reached a low of minus 12% last month, so it's recovered slightly. And just to give you a comparison, the red one is called Man Group. It's a hedge fund that uses algorithmic trading as well. And this is the baseline for the NASDAQ. And the algorithm also tweaks its performance. People can keep track of what the algorithm does, what it buys. And I've also had to assume the role as a fund manager. I've had to talk to lawyers to really get contracts drawn up, because I don't really want to get sued at the end of the experiment, and give certificates out to shareholders as well. But it's been a bit of a journey where it's an ongoing journey, giving interviews. I gave an interview to CNBC last month. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about my take on interpretation of information, and with this project, Paradolic Robots. So people enjoy identifying pattern. We love to collect things. We love to categorize and collate information. But those are things that robots could do really well. So what about if they start to do those things? So the things that we love to do, they do them for us a little bit better over timescales that we can't perceive, in ways that we can't because of our busy lifestyles. So just an example, what about if you had a robot that could go over your garden, just counting the petals on every flower, just to give you a mean value of your relationship and how healthy it is? And what about if it collected the odd four-leaf clover for you while it worked? Another example could be a robot that was to find, identifying catalogue bird calls around your home. You know, what birds are there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and when do those goldfinches migrate from Africa? How does that shape your interpretation of your environment? I decided to focus on pareidolia, which is the human tendency to find faces and meaning in randomness. So this robot here looks for faces in clouds. And you can program it to look for specific faces. Oh, excuse me. So this was the proof of principle, a fixed webcam running a face detection algorithm. It found some quite interesting stuff. Whether you agree there's a face or not is quite interesting in its own right. You end up having a dialogue with the device in the same way as you might have a dialogue with your friend about whether you see a certain thing in the sky. It kind of compelled me to create a series of test cards. You know, at one point you're testing your own subjective interpretation of the cloud. Do you see the face? And at the same time, it's a way of calibrating the camera and the contrast setting on the algorithm to line up with your own. So the second iteration was one that could exist maybe in your house on a windowsill, which had a pan and tilt mechanism. So it's increasing the efficiency of finding that interesting face. And we understand what robots are. They've been in culture for a long time now. There's a lot of sci-fi tropes, and they also exist in industrial capacity, very function-driven. So how do you design a robot that looks for clouds? I decided to give it a couple of eyes. I don't know if you can see here. A couple of eyes or cameras, and then everything else is mounted on the inside. And there's a few little drawings here and there. I've explored kind of aspects of anthropomorphism. And there's an exploded diagram of the mechanism for anyone that's interested. So it holds two stepper motors. You've got the linkage, and then the main body is a heat sink and a storage for the processing units and the stepper drivers. There's a render of the final thing and some photographs. But we really want to know what it finds, right? That's the interesting part. You know, would you agree with what it finds? Would you be interested in what it finds? And would it give you a new way of looking at technology and the world around us? Sorry, this clicker is. Would you get it to look for somebody in specific as well? Would you get it to look for Elvis Presley, for instance? You know, or would you get it to look for your own face or your grandmother's face? And would you watch it watching? You know, this object is partly a sculptural piece. There's a theatre, and it's amazing to think that it's using a kind of a human way of analysing the world. And that brings us back to the conclusion. You know, how if we have algorithms that use a human way of looking at the world, how does that shift our own understanding of our technology? Next slide. And we just want to say thanks to Microsoft Cambridge and James Auger at Tutor Design Interactions and Microsoft for having us. It's been a fantastic time. Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, so just to change it up a little bit, I'm tormenting some audience members and ask some folks in the audience to ask you guys questions. So, Jay Hard.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
2 requests I have. I think for the fund manager person, making it regional would be kind of cool to see if the Asian fund can beat the European fund in terms of superstitions. Is it the witch versus the fourth number? Be kind of interesting. And on the robotics kind of human interface, that was really interesting too, where you kind of turn the human interface around a little bit, and it wasn't about how do you make interaction through more humane, but how do you take the machine to help you see the world in a way they were supposed to see when we were a child. And how do you turn that around? It was very interesting. I actually went camping the other day and saw more stars than I did in the last 5 years. And this was the talk we had. It's actually harder to actually look up for that long and look at the sky. We're not designed that way. We're designed to look down. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the only kind of opportunity I thought was the way you think about how the hardware is designed. What are the right semantics you think? We have a huge, rich history of representing the R2D2, if you will. But what should that be? Because that's the power that's helping you create the pattern. But at some point, maybe that's just like the training wheel. At some point, you don't need that anymore. It's stimulating your brain so that you can kind of do that on your own. Because that's what I think artists do. So thank you. It was really cool.
Awesome. And do you guys have any feedback? Or you just want more? I've also tormented Richard Banks, who you guys know, who's from...
Yeah, I'm slightly partisan, having been the liaison for these particular projects. But I know the goal of the RCA, of design interactions particularly, is to kind of use design as a provocation to kind of encourage people to talk about issues that they might not otherwise talk about through the kind of objects that you design. And you guys had your work on display in your degree show, for a week in London. So I am curious kind of what kind of conversations you had when you engaged with kind of members of the public and other designers and people who are visiting, kind of as a response to the work that you've done.
Can I go first?
Yeah. I mean, like, my project's kind of separated between technology and superstitions. So on one side, when even just talking about the examples that I revealed at the beginning, I mean, that was quite a huge surprise to people. I mean, we consider ourselves as very rational, and just to reveal all these examples, just to show how well it really is and how crazy it is, that was quite an interesting conversation. But also technology as well. I mean, the markets are increasingly occupied by trading algorithms. There's something like 80% or 60%. And it was really to kind of introduce a conversation about that. There was a flash crash in 2010, and we don't know how it crashed. It was caused by algorithms, but we have no idea. And it's really just to open a conversation up about that.
With regards to response from public on my project, people were kind of really, really, really interested in what it found and were kind of really keen to kind of explore the device, which was great. I think I designed it as a kind of a paradoxical device, something that would just stimulate some thought rather than be a commercial product. But I was amazed that people kind of just wanted to see it in public spaces, in their homes, and kind of wanted to use it. So for me, it was kind of, okay, maybe I've got something here more than simply a piece of design academia. So it was interesting, people's responses for sure.
Okay, and one last audience person that I'm tormenting, Molly Steenson, who's here for the Faculty Summit.
Hi, guys. I will admit I got a chance to have lunch with both these guys yesterday and hear more about the project. But I was struck, one of the things about critical design is the idea of a rhetorical role of design, something that I think you both capture. I think the CNBC appearance is just totally awesome as a further movement in that direction. But I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about the rhetoric that your projects are intended to engage. If we have time, I think the time is very short, so your answer will probably have to be short. But I'd be curious.
That was very short.
It's really difficult because I think for our projects, people read into them from a different point of view. So the traders see Shing's project from a different view that I see it, and that from from other people, And so I think it's the same with a lot of the projects that come out of our course. Is it's about there's a personal view on the technology, and I think that's what's powerful. If we're not saying this is bad, this is good. We're not taking a position other than saying kind of what if, and how do you feel about that, and how does that take us somewhere different within the context of technology and within the context of design.
All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
All right.